Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. It is remarkable, though, how age has come to be Joe Biden's primary political weakness. And I would point to a recent ABC News poll that says 86% of Americans think that Biden, who is 81, is too old to do the job for another term. 86% of Americans. It is hard to get that kind of approval for apple pie in national survey. And it includes also notably 59% of people who think that both Biden and Trump are too old. Trump, again, is 77 years old. But Monet, I would expect Donald Trump to run hard on this as we get toward November. If he's the Republican nominee, he is going to say a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for President Harris. And we all know the popularity of the vice president, which is lower, remarkably, than President Biden's. And so it is a significant challenge, I think, for the president politically. And he doesn't seem to be rising to meet it. There's new video out again on Tuesday of the president climbing the stairs to Air Force One, doing a little bit of a stutter step, a little bit of a stumble. And these are the small things that I think are making Americans worried that even if they're not convinced he's not too old right now at age 81, do they want to sign up for this until he's 86 years old?
Right. And I think it's interesting to look back to 2020 and think about how Biden's age was perceived then compared with now, because he did present himself as a transitional candidate, implied that he might serve for only a single term if he were elected. The candidacy was all about getting past Trump and obviously the chaos of the pandemic, which had characterized the last year of Trump's presidency. So I think a lot of Americans voted for Biden, who had previously been vice president and a long-serving U.S. senator, as a vote for a safe pair of hands to get out of the chaos of that current moment, not thinking that they were buying into 8 years of a guy who clearly was aging very rapidly and was somewhat in decline already. Fast forward 4 years, and Biden clearly has deteriorated quite a lot, even compared with how he was in 2020. The mental slip-ups that we've seen just in the past few weeks have been on a much higher order than anything that we had seen at that time. Obviously, confusing the names of foreign leaders has become very famous now, and just the stiffness in his gait and some of these trips. I think that there probably are a few Americans who haven't seen and heard these clips by now and have a big sense that he's really in trouble. Not only is he not at the peak of his powers, but he, turn for the worse really at any moment. So I think Trump is going to lean on that critique of Biden much harder in 2024 than he did in 2020. And it's already really breaking through, and Democrats know that they have a big problem on their hands, both between Biden and his unfitness, and then the fact that it seems like Kamala Harris, who's deeply unpopular, is locked into that second slot. So it will be a major campaign theme. We're probably only seeing the beginning of that as a major story of the race.
Alicia, in your column this week, you take up some of the medical studies on aging. And the headline, if listeners want to go find that and give it a read, is What We Know About Cognitive Decline. And give us a sense of the argument that you're making there.
Well, I was looking at not just studies, but new technologies and what they're discovering using artificial intelligence. And, physical decline in many ways, it manifests cognitive decline. So let's just take gait, the way you walk. People start to slow down, their gait starts to slow, and their pace starts to slow more than a decade before they actually start to manifest cognitive or symptoms of cognitive decline. Interestingly, if you do what doctors sometimes are starting to do is they'll stick patients on a treadmill and watch how they walk. And then they'll ask them to do some simple cognitive tasks, count backwards from 50. And many people who are in the very early stages of decline, they can walk okay. But then they have to start doing mental processing tasks. And then they start to stumble, or their gait actually shifts and shows some abnormality. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to try to diagnose Biden. Everyone knows what they see, that he walks with a little bit of a short shuffle. He has difficulty moving his legs. One reason people have these gait abnormalities is because of neurological dysfunctions. There's already some kind of a decline or degeneration in the brain, and that affects the way they walk. And similarly with the way they speak, and there are a lot of it, and again, this is usually using machine learning that records voices and people who are experiencing cognitive decline or not even yet significant cognitive decline, but shows up in brain scans, and they are able to use machine learning to pair the voices and then differences in pitch, intonation, the way they emphasize vowels, very minor differences with the way they perform on cognitive tests and their brain scans. And they're able to draw parallels and correlations. And again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to try to diagnose Biden, but the way he speaks is not just the substance and the fact that he has a habit of forgetting names for leaders or mistaking them for someone else, but it's just the way he speaks. It not only just doesn't connote vigor, but you can see that he's actually struggling in some ways. And I think that, again, with the caveat, I'm not going to try to diagnose him. This is just another manifestation of the early stages of some kind of mild cognitive impairment. So we're learning more and more about this because of these new technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence, that wasn't even available a decade ago. To my knowledge, that Biden hasn't even done a cognitive test, and these cognitive tests that most primary care doctors do, they're really rudimentary. Most people pass, and they're finding that they really miss most up to 90% mild cognitive impairment cases because people, one, they're rudimentary, and two, people manifest different symptoms of cognitive decline in the early stages. But to my knowledge, again, Biden hasn't even performed cognitive tests, so we really don't know. Voters only see what they see on TV, hear his press conferences. And so in a way, like, voters can make a judgment on that. We don't need an official diagnosis from a doctor. And just one other point would be that when people start to stumble mentally, they start to also experience physical symptoms. You mentioned the stumble. That's not unexpected or unsurprising for someone who's actually in the early or stages of a dementia or mild cognitive impairment. They start to actually fall more. Don't discount the possibility that Biden could experience bigger physical issues in the next several months.
In the face of these voter concerns, though, the White House has been looking for an issue to motivate Democrats to the polls. It was Bidenomics, it was shrinkflation, it was junk fees. And Monet, on Wednesday, we have another example of this, another $1.2 billion in student loan debt relief for about 150,000 borrowers is announced. That brings the total of debt cancellation to $138 billion for about 3.9 million borrowers. And notable about what's happening on Wednesday, Monet, here is the top of the Washington Post story. President Biden will email 150,000 student loan borrowers to let them know their debts have been forgiven. And I'm sure that is just a matter of administrative process. I'm sure this has nothing to do with the politics of sending a personal email from the president who's up for re-election to 150,000 potential voters. Monet, you get the last word.
The cynicism in that act is really shocking, as you imply. I do think that obviously every president wants to get credit for the policies that he pushes through, particularly those that make voters materially better off. And that's exactly what Biden is trying to do by waving away loan debt for a lot of Americans who are saddled with it. But the fact that he's sending this email to make sure that his name is personally attached to it and that he gets that positive mental association is just a little bit of a grimy step down, reminiscent of Trump signing his name on those stimulus checks during his own presidency. It's just really one of the lowest forms of politics. But more broadly, I do think that President Biden is trying to recreate in a piecemeal fashion what the Supreme Court wouldn't let him do in one big sweeping act, which is to cancel as much student loan debt as possible, despite the fact that obviously Congress is supposed to have responsibility for this as a general policy matter. The president shouldn't be able to tinker with the loan balance and shouldn't be able to increase the federal debt by forgiving some of these loans, but he's using whatever policy levers are available to him to do it by tweaking this and that program, despite the fact that he couldn't get away with it in a larger fashion. So we'll see if voters respond in the way that he hopes. I'm skeptical, but it's possible that he could get a little bit of support, especially from some young folks.
Thank you, Monet and Alicia. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.